I'm going to step through now some very preliminary results looking at traces from the Lighthouse pilots. This is a course that I ran at Birmingham and some of the data from that. But I'm going to stress again, this is very, very preliminary results. It's the first time really I've looked at this level of data. So it's one course, but I'm just going to look at one document that was used during a particular course. But it was the course has been run twice, once in the 2014-15 academic year and once this last year. And in the 2014-15 year particularly, there are two phases of activity. There's the original phase where the document was taught and when the lectures are happening, and then later on, just before exams, you saw another flurry of activity. And then there's also a period during 2015 and 16, which is the current year, when it was taught again. I'm going to do these in reverse order because basically when it was in the first run of this course, it was essential reading and 55 students engaged with it and more did during the revision period, so it makes you feel good as an educator. During the last run of the course, I set this as supplementary reading and 3 students looked at it, and as we'll see, not in great detail. So I'm going to deal with those first and then get the slightly more encouraging traces later on. So yes, we're going to start off then with the current year's 2015-16 run of the course. This happened last November. First of all, this on the left-hand side is the standard analytics we're getting from Lighthouse at the moment. It tells you on average what percentage of the document was read, how many students at the bottom read it, 3 active students, when they happened, and also looking at the document, the bit in the middle here, if you can see my mouse, is showing which portions of the document are read. And this is quite interesting because actually you've got lots of people looking at the beginning and then tailing off. That's quite a common behaviour. But then a sort of gap in the middle. And I think when I first thought that, I thought it was a sort of data thing that tracing wasn't happening. But we'll see it actually represents some of the behaviours. So this is one of the traces from that, of the 3 students. This is a 50-second pass through half of the document. This is skimming the page, getting to page 14, halfway through the document and stopping. Deciding it wasn't worth reading, clearly. Here's our second trace, and this is somebody who actually is spending a bit more time in the document. Not reading in huge detail, this is 5 minutes for a 30-page academic paper, but certainly giving it some attention. But interesting enough, notice going to about just over halfway through the document, and then perhaps deciding they got a bit bored, skipping to the end and then skimming backwards and then pausing a little on, I think it's the page of the very last diagram of the document, pausing a little and then skimming back a bit more. And then a gap, probably when they go off to make a cup of tea or something happened that interrupted them, and then spending a little bit more time towards the end of the document, maybe looking at the conclusions, maybe looking at some of the examples at the end. So again, it's sort of starting to get some idea as an educator, the way people are actually dealing with the documents I give them. This one is weird, and I just don't understand. I mean, this person jumps straight to the end. If this had been their second view of the document, I could have understood this. Maybe they've learned, though, that triaging documents, sometimes the best thing is to look at the end, read the conclusions, and ignore the rest of the document. But actually, this person then skims backwards from the end, stops on the, and this is over a period of about 10 minutes, stops on the last page that had some diagrams in. So basically, the first time they saw pretty diagrams skimming backwards, and then jumps a bit later. There's a gap when they're, I think it's just sitting there with their browser window open, and then looks at some other pages, which is in fact the first examples in the document. And assuming this person's using the thumbnails to navigate this document rather than skimming, you're not seeing skimming behaviour. Okay, let's go now to the revision period from the 2014 run of the course. Now here the pattern, of course, again, very heavy. Lots of people, I mean, in fact, you see a lot of people who just open the document on the first page and never do any more. With classic click-throughs, they would come as having seen the document. In fact, they just look at the first page and in fact probably don't read that. They click through and go away. But then you're seeing, more engagement at the beginning of the document and working its way through. 55 active students coming back several times. Some of those will be revision versus the original period. We're going to focus on this revision period. Here's somebody during the revision period doing a 2-minute skim of the full 30-page document. Just remind him, maybe this person did read it in detail before. Here's somebody else spending 4 minutes, not a long time, but what they've done is they've skimmed forward, looked at a particular page and spent some time reading that page, and then skimmed pretty much to the end of the document, well, not to the end, halfway through the document and stopped. Here's another topping and tailing, which is very like the one we saw before, where the person this is very, very rapid, 45 seconds the whole document, but they skim partway through the document, just glancing through it, jump to the end and skim backwards, but never spend any time. Again, perhaps they read it during the original period. And here's another one where we're dealing with proper reading of documents. There's about a 4-minute period when they're looking through the document with pauses, and then a longish pause on one page. That could be they're spending a lot of time reading, maybe they went to get a cup of tea or something, so it's not necessarily means they were reading during that time if the document was on top. Although the fact that they do a little recap does suggest they were engaging. Okay, now the actual teaching period for this run. Again, a range of quite complex behaviours. Here's somebody reading, looking through, actually getting right to the end of the document, spending a lot of time towards the end. But this is over a 25 minutes period. So having spent perhaps about 10 minutes or so reading the beginning of the document and then spending a lot of time on a particular page. But they do a little recap, which does suggest, again, they were actually engaging. Somebody else, again, skimming, waiting on pages, looking at some pages in more detail. And another person doing the same. These are actual reading behaviours. You notice they've got this tending to skim bits, wait for a bit, skim a bit. And there's a tendency for the wait bits to be where the pretty pictures are. And typically they skip the maths. Surprise, surprise. And this is even more skimming behaviour. Somebody's twice in a day looking at the document, and then twice within those periods, 30 minutes apart, literally just in a few moments skimming the whole document, skimming again, waiting a whole day and doing that at the end. Perhaps they were trying to decide, get up the gizmo to actually look at this document, and then never did during this period. So I started to get some idea of what real traces look like. So when I sort of speculated on traces, I thought I'd see topping and tailing behaviour. We did see topping and tailing behaviour, but typically the person doesn't skim and then gets to the end. They skim to the end and then move back. And it's quite a sensible strategy to find your conclusion. So that's quite reasonable. Similarly, I was talking about in the guessing, I was guessing people would skim the document and then go and look at bits in detail. What people tend to do is they skim a bit, read a bit, skim a bit, read a bit. Again, quite reasonable behaviours, but starting to learn about real behaviours rather than guessing what those behaviours might be. However, perhaps the real message is this is a very, very messy picture. There are lots of different behaviours, and although they fall roughly into patterns, they are not by any means identical. So the matching, and they're different lengths of periods, they skim different lengths of the document. So this is quite complex data. So in going from this hand analysis and spotting sort of patterns to something that allow us to do big data analysis, I think there's still a lot of work to do.